All right, we are live. We're going to talk about the freight markets and some strategies for success or for failure, however you want to look at it. Stay tuned right after this. Yes. Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, December. We're already in December, man. It's December 3rd. Let's get rid of that black screen. So I hope you got your coffee. Hold on. The dog might want to go out. Hey, what do you want? Just lay down. Lay down. Lay down. Lay down. Good boy. I got this foot warmer right here. I don't know if you guys, I don't know if he'll show up on the screen or not. But anyways, it's Wednesday, December 3rd. We are already in December. 2025 went like that. Like you blinked and boom, there it was, right? Last week was pretty slow, obviously for Thanksgiving. A lot of trucks deal with weather. A lot of trucks are down, and a lot of people are just taking the time off. It's hold on. All right. Anyways, it's been cold. It snowed here a little bit Monday, enough to make a couple of cars wipe out. The camera's extra shaky. Man, I'm such an amateur. I'm such an amateur at this, but that's why I only got like 5,000 subscribers or whatever. But anyways, I appreciate everybody for coming in. I know I haven't been consistent with my live feeds, but it's been pretty busy. I have a rare moment where I don't have any empty trucks really to deal with for a minute. So I just decided that, it'd be a good time to go live. I want to show you the weather. I want to show you some market conditions and some trend lines. And then, of course, CDN Freight Broker, he sends me like a market summary kind of thing every week, usually on Monday or Tuesday, that he gets from his company. And so I try to share that because a lot of times what I see written is what I'm already experiencing. So I pay attention to trends. I pay attention when markets are getting warm, and I also pay attention. The weather has a big factor. So one of the things that um, I look at is like, for example, yesterday in DAT, um, the in and out ratios for Florida, it was like 3,900 going into Florida and like 400 coming out. And so when you have a big, huge weather system that comes across, because like I-70 was messed up from Kansas City, basically all the way to almost Columbus, 70 got jacked up. There was a pile up there over there by Brazil, Indiana on 70 there. St. Louis was a mess. I had a couple of trucks that went through there yesterday. And Monday it was St. Louis was impassable. 70 between St. Louis and Kansas City was all jacked up. Parts of it were closed. And when you see that, a lot of trucks that dispatch themselves, they tend to go south, right? And I'm like, we're all going to go to Florida. We're all going to go to Georgia, and that's where you see those kind of ratios come up. And which also means that I saw an influx of 80, 90 cents a mile loads coming out of Florida. So I defaulted. I've got a truck delivering in Jacksonville today, and we got a multi-stop coming out that pays pretty good. So that's the strategy. Either if you're going to go cheap, go light, or go empty, or depending on what you get afterwards, or you find the multi-stop that still covers your rate per day, even though it's a little bit more work. So that's kind of how I look at that. So this camera is kind of, there we go. And so that's the strategy I use. Yesterday, one of our new drivers who's, getting punched in the face by the spot market, I gave him a few tips on what to do. And I try to help people as much as I can because I've been doing this for a minute. I've been able to transition out of the truck because of this. And I enjoy the hunt. I enjoy trying to help other owner operators succeed. And the truth part of this title, the truth is a lot of people are their own worst enemy. It's that simple. And there are aspects to being an owner operator truck driver that go beyond just driving the truck. Like you could be a 20, 30 year veteran of the trucking industry, and you've been in the Bronx and backed into this impossible dock, and nothing intimidates you. You could be the best driver. You've got 2 million miles or 3 million miles of safe driving, never had an accident, not even so much as nicking somebody's mirror at the truck stop with your trailer. But if you're horrible with business sense, if you're horrible with money, if you can't even scan documents from your phone and manipulate email, well, you're still going to struggle, right? And that's one of the biggest shocks when people become owner operators. That was a shock to me when I went to Landstar. I felt like a rookie all over again because now I was no longer in my element. Everything was new to the point I was making rookie mistakes in the driving aspect. Like there was one point where I was heading down I-49 southbound, and this grain hauler passes me, honks his horn. I get on the CB, he goes, dude, he's like, hey man, one of your doors is open. And I look, and there's my door flapping in the breeze there. I'm like, holy crap. So I pulled over, closed the door, and that was just in time because coming up was a construction zone. I probably would have knocked out about 5 people and a couple of poles had that door been still open. So it really kind of humbled me to the point that, okay, I need to slow down. I need to concentrate on what I'm doing so I don't forget the other important part. So the administrative stuff is just as important as the driving stuff. Yes, it's important to drive safe. It's important to, do your job in that sense, but it's also important to scan your bills because if you're working with a factoring company, they could be picky about the paperwork. And the way I look at the bill of ladings, that people tend to, just throw in the dash and not, throw in the dash or lose or whatever. You got to look at that as those are dollar bills because that's how you get paid. And then get on YouTube or find some tutorials on how to scan paperwork, turn them into PDFs so they're easy to email, easy to give to the broker, easy to give to your carrier. That is one of the biggest hurdles that we have as a carrier is drivers just being able to scan their paperwork. And that's just as important as making sure your doors are closed going down the interstate. That's just as important as being able to back into the dock without hitting anything, because you're an owner operator, you're a business owner, and giving good customer service to the brokers, to your carrier, is important. It's the number one important thing, because without the carrier, without the brokers, you're not making any money, right? So, and if you have your own authority, you've probably had a crash course on how to do your own documents and that kind of situation. And if you're the kind of driver that wants the office work done by somebody else, then you're going to struggle a little bit, especially in this market. So that's the harsh truth that a lot of owner operators need to hear. And I was once like that. Now I was always organized about my bill of ladings. But as far as like the other stuff I had to learn, I remember the first time I entered the spot market, I was like dealing with PDFs and like, okay, I had to create a system. Creating a system is important. And so, but anyways, let's show the chat up on the screen. You guys I appreciate everybody coming in here, and we're going to take a look at the first thing here. Let's see, share screen. Let's look at the weather alerts. Now, you guys have probably been dealing with some weather for the last few days. Well, it looks like unless you're going to New Mexico and Colorado and parts of Montana, of course, Montana, right? You're not seeing a whole lot right now. So there's not a whole lot of alerts. There's some wind out here in the Midwest. Then what's this blue stuff? Freezing fog advisory, which, here in the Ozarks, you have some freezing fog advisories. But other than that, it's pretty quiet unless you're going out west. If you're crossing the Rockies, you're going to have probably a hard time. So, but other than that, looks like it's pretty quiet for now. Let's see. Let's put this on load availability, and we'll just have this as a background as I read the comments. There we go. All right, here we go. Shannon Thomas, who was asking me to be live yesterday, she is not feeling good, so everybody give her some prayers. Cheap Freight Hauler, good morning from Florida. Good morning. Red Lady, what's up? Other trucker James Best in the house. Word. Good morning. I'm working today. You are? Currently 64 degrees and no snow in sight. There you go. That's how you do it. 26 degrees and no snow. That's kind of what we're dealing with here now. The snow melted yesterday for the most part. Which, the dog going in and out, like I just demonstrated, I have to wipe his feet off. He gets a treat for it every time. So sometimes he's figured out, hey, if I go outside and come right back in, I get a treat. No, that's not how it works, dog. Crystal sounds like a good day to lay on the couch with a good book. Tolga's in the house. You're catching a live feed. What's up with that, man? But yeah, Crystal's got to work. So everybody's saying good morning to each other. I'm tired of adulting. I want to go back to kindergarten. Nothing witty is in the house. Let's see. I'm going to skip over some of these. Right Lane, what's up? How's it going? Long time, brother. Yep. Glad to see you in here. See CM Freight Brokers in the house. Does anyone keep a printer scanner in the truck? I did both, right? So I have this portable scanner. It's about I don't know, as wide as a piece of paper and about that thick. And it was great for the before the phone apps really got good, that was the way to scan paperwork for me. Like at Landstar, I used that. Um, and then I kept a printer. So other trucker James Best showed me a printer that he had in his truck, and I bought the same thing. And that thing has been amazing. Now, I didn't use it very often in the truck. And using a printer in the truck, I would get the one with the toner, not with the laser inkjet or with the inkjet. Don't get inkjet for the truck because of the weather temperature changes and all that. But that printer is going strong still. I've got it set up in my house. It's the preferred printer. It's only a black and white printer, but I really don't need to print color things very often. And that's been really great. I only used that a couple of times. A lot of times it was just easier to email something to Loves and then they print it for me. But yeah, that was I did. So CDN says what Steve is describing called SOP, standard operating procedures. That is true. Rockin' Robin, what's up? Let's see. Quick hit, still trucking. Went to Dale's APU in Springfield. Game changer. Yes, Dale is a good dude. He resurrected that tri-pack that tried to kill me. It did finally end up dying, but I think it was just a lost cause. But he did end up giving me some comfort for a minute. But other two keys with drivers and BOLs before you get out of your cab to get signatures, study BOL and put ideal red X next to spot where consignee is to print and sign. Yes, always get both. Yes. But check file size. If file, often I get 12 megabyte files. Use an app that scans into small file. I use an app called Tiny Scanner Pro, and it was a one-time fee of like $5. Now I don't think it exists anymore. I've looked for it in the Play Store to send the links to other drivers, and I can't find it. So what I need to do is I need to research what's the next best thing. And I know Cam Scanner's out there, but it costs monthly, which, I mean, it's a cost of doing business. But I need to look for other PDF scanner apps. But also the actual physical act of taking your phone and taking a picture of the bill of lading is a challenge for a lot of drivers. And one of the things I did to help on the cropping is you crop it before you take the picture. So I'll put the rectangle right where the edges of the paper are, hold it still, click. If there's any shadows, use a flash. You don't want to, like I've seen some bills where it was the paper was on the table and they're like standing up fully. And then when you go to zoom in on it, everything's blurry. And so a lot of those loads get rejected by our factoring company. So if you do it the way I've demonstrated or talked about, I didn't really demonstrate it, but there's less cropping. And then my PDF scanner got it right there. Yesterday I had to scan 29 bill of ladings for somebody. And it literally took me 5 minutes. He sent me the pictures and the text. I turn them into PDFs like that, send it to the broker. I have to hear from the broker whether that worked or not. But a great PDF scanner, paid or free, is going to be your best friend. Now, a lot of them act like the TransFlow app. I don't know if you guys have used that. Those of you who use that, like if you're at Schneider or whatever. But I also still had the scanner in my truck that I could hook up to the laptop for the really hard to do bills. A perfect example is Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble have these bill of ladings that look like they're printed on that old printing paper from 1984, right? And here's the process, right? So you pick up your load, you go through the gate, you get these bills, and you get this book, right? And you see this guy like rip the sides off, rip the side paper off, and then crip. You know, he's creeping, he's separating the copies, right? And then he hands you the most faded, miserable copy and then throws the best part, the original, the top, into the back of the truck. And then they watch you lock it up. Now you're saying, well, how do you deal with that? So what I would do, that was the packing list, but it's still labeled the bill of lading. So what I would do is when I get to the receiver and I open the doors, I will actually grab that paper, because 99.9% of the time, the receiver doesn't want that packing list. In fact, that's something that usually have to clean out of your trailer after you've delivered the load. So I would grab it and I would scan that and then add the final sheet that had the signature on it. And then that way I had everything. And it was easy to scan because that part wasn't faded. Whereas by the time you get your bill of lading, they're so faded that even the scanning apps have trouble. Like there was one load that I delivered in Fulton, Missouri at Dollar General. It was a Procter & Gamble load. And I couldn't get a good scan to save my life. So what I had to do is I had to take the original bill of lading that I had, or the copy, and I had to go to FedEx and photocopy it, photocopy that, darken that, and finally I was able to get just enough that it would work for the factoring company. So and why did I have to do that? Because that was how I get paid. The way here it is at Like Trucking, that no bills, no payment. That's just it. And if Thunder rejects it, you lose the risk of not getting that money taken back. I mean, the bill of lading is an important piece of paper. Now, if you're at Schneider as an owner operator, I was pretty bad about waiting a week or two to scan all my bills. And then I would go to an OC and try to use their crappy scanner that always locked up. So once I got the Transflow app, that made it a lot easier. I was able to do it as I went. Landstar, you had to have the bills scanned by a certain time if you wanted to get paid. So if they weren't all in by Thursday, then, or whatever day it was, then you didn't get paid for that load on that check because it was a weekly check. So Cheap Freight says, I delivered a load Monday that had 17 POs, had to get every one of them signed. Yes, we have that similar thing going. I still use Tiny Scanner, but I keep a printer for those blind shipments. Yep. Genius Scam, free, no watermark. Okay, cool. I'll have to look that up. So, but anyways, so the paperwork is an important aspect of your business. Just as important as driving the truck safely, just as important getting to that dock and getting the places on time. So just kind of keep that in mind. So right here, I got the 123 low board hot map, 48065. If you want to try it out for free for 30 days, look at the tools yourself. And you can also look at loads for free without an MC number. You just won't see a lot of the information. So, but if you use my code, you can get all this for free. And then we've already looked at the weather, and then I've got the market condition that CDN sends. And what's interesting is this report is going towards truck stop, whereas usually it was doing, well, it's got some DATS stuff. So it's getting from the two bigger low boards on the interwebs. And another discussion I had is that now a while back, there's a YouTube short of me asking live to DAT if they're worried about carriers not using their low board anymore, leaving their low board. And they said, oh, they're not. Meanwhile, when was the last time you saw C.H. Robinson on DAT? Right? When there's a lot of the main brokers, or you see RXO might have one load posted, but then you go to their site and there's like 15 coming from the same area that aren't on the DAT. Same thing with Ryan Tran, same thing with Nolan, Arrive. They all have their own low boards. And so my morning starts off opening all of those brokered low boards because I can see times, I can see customers, I have direct access to each of their reps. So I can ask questions like who the receiver is, CH Robinson and Uber, they'll tell you who the customer is. those are handy tools when you're trying to know what you're getting into. You might see a load that goes from somewhere to Tyler, Texas, and like, oh, that's a good load. Come to find out it's Target, and it's an 8-hour unload, and you don't find that out till you get the Raycon. So it's important to have these relationships. It's important to be able to talk to real people in this world of AI and computer algorithms and all that stuff. So let's see. Mallory, what's up? Man, we got a lot of people I haven't been in here in a minute. Good to see you. The point is create a best practice so as you drive can point out consignee signature on POD from 5 years ago. Daily, my office is asking me to approve a POD, often signed in wrong box, right? Jerome, what's up? CDN saying hi to Best. All right, so right now, this overall market, we're in the loose category, which is great because it was in the soft for the longest time. Flatbed has definitely gone down. Flatbed was in the neutral, and then reefer has gone down a little bit, and then van is starting to slowly come down. But if you look at this chart, November finished with 209 a mile on the average in van, and then in flatbed 248, and then in reefer 254. So an upward trend, except in van and reefer, but not in flatbed. Flatbed's on a downward trend. That's seasonal. Imagine a lot of that seasonal. And then tariff related. Biggest market movers, both negative and positive. Northeast has died down. I've noticed this. Outbound ratios in Pennsylvania have gone down quite a bit. So it's harder to get a decent rate out of Pennsylvania more than normal. Which I don't send a whole lot of trucks up there unless they ask for it. This Columbus to Indianapolis, that's a great lane. It's a short line haul, but a lot of times you can get a pretty decent coin for that lane for a daily run. Spot loads. Total load activity rose 12% after falling nearly 6% in the previous week. Volume was about 19% higher than in the same 2024 week, but down close to 16% versus the 5-year average for the week. So that's that chart. Now, a lot of these charts probably don't mean much to you, and they might bore you, but and then I like this chart because it kind of shows you the average rate per mile in each region. And as you can see, going to the West Coast, you're not getting a whole lot into there, and you're not coming out of Oregon or Washington for a good rate in van. This area is odd. The upper Midwest is kind of odd. The lack of volume, like in North and South Dakota and upper Wisconsin and Minnesota, can not really Wisconsin, but in Minnesota can be, once you're north of Minneapolis, it becomes kind of a crapshoot. And then of course they're not paying to go into Illinois and Chicagoland because you're going to get it coming out. So let's see what else we got here. This is kind of an interesting chart. So this is your consumer confidence index. I don't know how they measured it. But it's down, which is probably a bad marker for a lot of the retail stores, a lot of the retail outlets. The only thing really selling, I think, is necessities instead of luxuries, and then also your beer, your alcohol, your energy drinks, your holiday foods, the sugar bombs that are giving you cancer. All those things are probably on the up. Those tend to do better in recessions than worse. Let's see. Cheap Freight says flatbed is trending down because of me. There you go. All right. All right. Market data. U.S. Consumer Confidence Index declined by 6.8 points in November to 88.7 from 95.5 in October. Its lowest level since April after moving sideways for several months. A powerful Thanksgiving weekend storm hammered Midwest freight corridors with heavy snow, ice, and whiteout conditions, snarling travel and triggering major delays for carriers and brokers. That kind of jacked a lot of things up. The White House has announced a new major initiative targeting the financial channels used by undocumented immigrants. The trucking industry is expected to be heavily impacted by this, as the total population of foreign-born drivers now exceeds 720,000, comprising about 18% of the entire U.S. driver pool. Department of Homeland Security has launched I-9 audits in Northern and Central California trucking companies. The ATA Truck Tonnage Index fell 2.1% in October, marking the sharpest monthly drop in volume since January and signaling continued freight market weakness. Now, this ain't going to be a doom and gloom video, and I'll explain why here in a minute. Ocean container rates from Asia fell 32% last week. So that's interesting. And then a joint operation between federal and state law enforcement along Interstate 40 in Texas resulted in 31 commercial drivers being taken off the road for lacking lawful residency in the United States. Wonder how many of those non-domiciled CDLs said no name given, because that's how blatant and bad it is. You have actual CDLs that say no name given. They're not even pretending to fake it, right? And then they're coming out. Federal regulators are threatening to withhold up to $151 million in transportation funding earmarked for Pennsylvania, may also decertify Pennsylvania's CDL program if the state fails to correct errors to the issuance of non-domiciled commercial driver's licenses. So, market summary, and we'll move on after this. The domestic U.S. transportation market glides in December on a steady but subdued note, with no clear signals of year-end demand acceleration on the horizon. Yet whispers of impending capacity crunch loom as a pivotal shift. Black Friday's reported sales uptick, while welcome, stems more from persistent inflation than robust volume gains, leaving freight lanes quieter than seasonal norms might suggest. Regulatory pressures are tightening on the reins of the driver workforce as stricter non-domicile CDL revocations and English proficiency mandates are sidelining carriers faster than new entrants can fill the void, trimming the driver pool and injecting upward pressure on spot rates. This recalibration could spark constraints that propel spot rates upward, offering carriers a rare tailwind amid the lull. So, we're still waiting for the government to do its thing. We're still waiting for the government to save the little guy. And so you can't count on that. So you got to create your own solution. How do you survive a down freight market? By being as efficient as you can and keeping your costs as low as possible. Because, you got to have some money to be able to either wait it out or run under a profit for a minute. Either way, you got to have some cash flow. If you don't have that, your days are numbered. It just depends on how long you want to prolong the misery. And with AI trying to do its thing in our industry, it's going to get worse and worse, because now the computers tell the brokers the pricing, who tell the customers the pricing based off of how many trucks are in the area or out of the area. So that's a big thing. So, for example, when Florida is getting flooded with inbound because everybody's going south to avoid the weather, then the computers say, hey, man, you could probably get this going for 80, 90 cents a mile. And if there's enough desperate people to take that don't have a good strategy, then it continues. And so you have to have a strategy, right? And so you can't sit there and yell at the person next to you, quit taking cheap freight, because you're ruining the rates, right? Here's the thing. If that was the case, right, a large percentage of people have to deadhead out of Florida. Okay? So the whole sitting on the dock, don't take cheap freight, you would think that with that logic, that rates in Florida would go up coming outbound. but it doesn't. It's supply and demand. When you got 3,000 loads going into Florida and you've only got 400 coming out, the shippers that live in that area are having a ball because it's cheaper for them to ship. Whereas if you are in Columbus, Ohio, you probably have a different strategy. So when you're dealing with an individual broker and you're being outbid, yes, that's where that whole somebody else taking the cheap freight is keeping me from making money. But at the same time, you want to be able to put yourself in a situation where you're not really forced to do that, right? And so if you can keep your costs low, you can underbid that other guy and still make a profit. Now, with that being said, sometimes you put in your quote unquote lowest bid, like this is my bottom, and then it doesn't move, right? You're like, I'll look for something else. But when you need something specific, like I have to get this truck to Columbus, Ohio, if no ifs, ands, or buts by this time, then that's when you get affected by everybody else lowballing you. So it's that's the trucking industry. That's how it is. Think about Uber Ride. What did Uber Ride do to the taxi cabs, right? Everybody wants the lowest price. The shippers want the lowest price. When you buy your Amazon package, you want the lowest shipping that you can get, right? That's the way the world works. The shippers got reamed during the post COVID shutdowns, and now they have computer AI tools to help them navigate the maximum lowest price that they can get stuff moved. So you have to find the shippers or the brokers that have the shippers that have the stuff that can't rely on that. Things like furniture, mattresses, equipment, um, alcohol, multi-stop, cabinets, the stuff that AI can't really price and that no one else wants to do. So now your truckload ratio doesn't matter as much because you're able to do the things that no one else wants to do. Well, I can either do a one and done for $1 a mile coming out of Florida, or I could deadhead 200 miles and grab this load that pays $2 a mile, but it's got 5 stops and I can get it done in 2 days or 1 day even, right? You know, if all the stops are together. So now the way they price that does depend on the outbound. Like, you know, doing John Deere out of Grovetown, when Georgia outbound volumes are through the roof, like it was over the summer, like 5,000 outbound loads, they have trouble moving those. Why? Because people would rather get the one and dones for the same amount of money. But when the Georgia market is struggling, they can lower their rates, even though they're average higher than what's coming out of the rest of Georgia. So that's a perfect example. If it's a dopamine hit or coping mechanism, it will still be movement, in other words. What are we talking about? Start looking at partials making 5,900 right now to Florida from Oklahoma, 1,200 miles, 3 pick, 3 drop. So you found the strategy, right? You found a strategy, Aaron. And that's what works, right? Desert Companion, good morning. So yeah, there's your market trends. Now, if we go to DAT trend lines, which you don't need a DAT subscription for this is right there on the website. Just type in DAT.com trend lines. This kind of gives you your posts, how they're down. Now, spot load posts down 46% last week. I saw that. I had a few trucks that were like, let's just wait till Friday morning because we couldn't really find anything Wednesday for their Friday load coming out of the house. Friday morning, I opened the load boards up and there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. And so the drivers tended to stay home. I think we did find one load, a couple of loads for the trucks, but there was one truck that basically, well, I guess I'll just wait till Monday. And then definitely after 1 o'clock, man, it's dead. I have trouble booking a truck after 1 o'clock. So if I have a truck that delivers at 8 a.m. and he's getting delayed at the receiver and we don't know, and like there's been a few times where I had a low book, but we had to cancel it because we couldn't make it to the shipper on time. And now we're scrambling at the last minute. We usually end up losing the day because there's just nothing out there. No one's answering phone calls. No one's answering emails, or it's already gone, or it's an old posting. It seems like after one or two, it becomes a crap show. Now, with that being said, look at spot rates went up a little bit. That was at the last minute holiday rush, which I did get some good rates. I've been getting some good rates for the last couple of weeks on a lot of things. Even on the stuff that a driver's very specific on what they want. So let's see. So this is kind of a neat chart, but at the end of the day, these charts aren't important in the sense that you just got to do what you got to do, right? If it fills you with anxiety, then you need to figure out where that anxiety comes from. If you have lack of cash flow, it's going to be a tough winter. If you have a lack of credit and cash flow, it's going to be a really tough winter. Because that's how a lot of businesses survive during down times. Think about retail outlets and how seasonal they are. They're in the red for a lot of big part of the year, and they have to be able to float that for a minute until they make their profits during the latter part of the year. And trucking is no different, right? You're going to have moments where you're in the red, and you're going to have moments where you're in the black. And that's just the reality of it. That's the harsh truth. And so if you have anxiety every time you go into that lounge, driver's lounge at the dealership, then you have to figure out where that's coming from. And if you know your numbers, you know exactly what you need, and you know exactly what you got in the bank, and you know exactly how to survive, then you sit there and you cruise through the bad satellite channels, and you're not worried about it. But if you sit there and you don't know how you're going to pay for it, if it's over, $800, then that's a problem. It's time to reevaluate a few things and make it to where that's not so. Chief Freight says, I'm always looking at partials. I've made good money with them. I'm just joking about my handle and that flatbed rates are dropping. James G, what's up? Amazon is paying big money right now, but it's a lot of night running. Yeah, I was trying to tell that to one of our drivers, the night running. Now, I didn't realize they're paying good right now, but that's going to last what, 2 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. But what's up, flatbed? Yeah, this new handle thing, I don't like that. So, all right, so let's look at since Bess is in here, let's look at outbound Illinois. Let's do high straight. Maybe. There we go. 3,700 to go from Edwardsville to North Haven, Connecticut. Let's take a look at that load. That's $370 a mile. Is it multiple stop, hazmat? Nope, just says consumer products. This is a holiday retail load, right? This is the last minute we need it there. See what the tolls are on this. Toll cost is only $93. Now, Connecticut, you're probably going to deadhead to Jersey or Massachusetts, or maybe even upstate New York to get something decent out of there. But this could be if you don't mind the Northeast, it could be a very profitable load. You can take that lower outbound rate coming out. So 370 miles. So unless it's not unless it's multiple stop or it's like a round trip that they're not being honest about, then this is I would almost take this load. Whereas this one's only paying 205 to go from Illinois to Idaho. Idaho, you're going to have a lot more trouble getting out. It is lighter, but that could be a bad thing when you're running out west. You know, if you have a light vehicle advisory out in Wyoming, then that could be a problem. Let's see, Morris, Illinois to Summer, Washington, same thing, $1.67 a mile. That's not a great rate going out there. Because you're not going to get it coming out. So if you let's look at Washington. Let's look at outbound. See what that looks like. There's only 7 loads going anywhere. Let's click on that. Yeah, $1 to go to LA. $1.79 to go to Lawrence, Kansas. That's not bad. One pick, one drop, no reefers. But are they going to answer the phone though if you call them? You know, that kind of thing. So everything else is California, Oregon. So that load is 8+ hours posting old, so it's probably not even there anymore. And they're still below the average because they can get away with that. You know, it's your job to talk them up, right? 272 to go from Des Plaines to Orlando. That's Chicagoland. $1.80 go to Arizona. It's not bad for Arizona. For van. Morris, Illinois to Groveland, Florida. I bet you I think I know what that's going to be. It's going to be snack cakes or whatever. That 44,000 is a generic weight. Oh, fertilizer. I was wrong. There's a lot of warehouses in Morris. California, Arizona. So this is all the long haul stuff. So if we put this by highest rate per mile, that's where all the shorties will be. So if you're in Illinois, you want to run Ohio, $1,400 for 220 miles. Let's take a look at this one. Well, it doesn't pick up till 6 p.m. tonight. Probably delivers first thing in the morning going to, isn't there a Kroger in Napoleon, right? They're way above the average, though. Let's look. Drop trailer. There you go. That's the jam right there. And see, and that's why you can't 100% look at these rate per mile postings as far as like the averages, the tools. You have to adjust your own self. Like, I don't know, I'm not saying this correctly. You can't consider that the Bible, right? Because those numbers can be skewed by the drop trailers, by the hazmats, by the multiple stops. And I saw it yesterday. There was a lane that I looked at where Cargo Chief had it at like $1.90 a mile, but the rate check had it at like $3 a mile. And what it was only pulling from so many reports. So the average was higher because there was probably a high paying multi-stop load there. But meanwhile, the realistic average was about right where I was able to score. Now, and that's the other thing. I don't sit there like, okay, like let's do this here. Let's go to this Melrose Park, Illinois to Napoleon, Ohio. Let's say this is well, no, that's a bad example. Let's go to something else here. Here's a Joliet to Indianapolis. They're above the average. So I'm seeing a lot of stuff above the averages there. But let's say the average here was 1,200. They're at 900. Depending on where I was and what I was doing and what I needed, I would sit there and say, okay, I would ask, I wouldn't be insanely high, but I wouldn't be like below either. These average rates are a guide because, and I'll give you an example, because the guide can still put you out of business. So let's look at California and let's go to inbound in California, right? The average on this lane, Bear City River, Utah to Long Beach, California is $900, $1.18 a mile. Now, let's say you're able to get this 1,064, or even the cargo chief says 1,225, $1.60 a mile. Let's say you're able to, if your cost per mile is $2.40 a mile, that's still a losing game. So what these tools allow you to do is it looks to see what to expect when you're going into a place and when you're coming out. Because if you don't know these tools and you don't know your markets and you go into Florida and you need $3 a mile to come out because your costs are insane because you just bought that, expensive Peterbilt or whatever, then you're going to sit and you're going to wonder why you can't find a load. Next thing you know, you're losing days and you're going broke and you don't even know why. Why? Because you don't know your pricing. You don't know what your limitations are. I guarantee that if you're in Tampa and you're asking for $3 a mile to go into Illinois, they will hang up on you and blacklist your phone number because it shows that you obviously don't know what you're doing. Pricing is important, not only for your own business, but to be able to move. You can't expect $3 a mile out of Colorado. You can't expect $3 a mile out of Florida. However, you can expect and try to get the $3 a mile going from Illinois to Florida or from Illinois to Colorado, right? Why? Because you're going to take the hit coming out. Sometimes we're just so focused on the one load that we're forgetting the rest of it. Perfect example. Let's say you get a load that pays $5,000 to go from, let's say, Kansas City to Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Now that's literally double what that normal rate is. But let's say you got $5,000 and you're like, oh wow, I can't believe I scored a home run. Yeah. But then you only make $200 a day after that. Just because you have that home run doesn't mean that you can relax for the rest of the loads, right? So you have to look at the whole picture. When you go into Florida, look at what's coming out and look at the whole number together, even if you deadhead. So, and I've said this over and over, I sound like a broken record, but our highest grossing drivers here are guys that run nothing but Georgia, Florida, and back. That's all they do. Because they know their lanes, they know their limitations, they know the brokers that have that freight, they know when to attack. They do a lot of night driving. And I put in a rate con the other day, $2,000 for like 300 something miles, one and done. Right? With that kind of, and it wasn't going to Miami either. It was like Orlando. You know what they did? Went right back up and grabbed something else that was very similar because they're looking at the whole picture. And if you're struggling to scan your paperwork and you're struggling to even keep track of what your numbers are, if you're struggling to even know what your cost of operation, this is why you have anxiety when the dealership's got your truck. Because there's so many aspects of running a business in the trucking industry that a lot of people just ignore. And I'm preaching to the choir here because I was the same way. When I got my first truck, a friend of mine sent me 10 videos on YouTube. It was one of the earlier guys that this is how you succeed at a trucking business. I watched 5 minutes of one of those videos. I didn't want to be told how to do what I already thought I knew how to do. But then through trial and tribulation, I learned that that's not the way to go. So I started paying attention to the business people. I started surrounding myself with the people that weren't struggling. And it was a game changer. So the mentality is like, I want to do it my way. I don't want anybody's help. I get that. I was there. I've done that. Got the shirt. But in this market, I mean, we're 33 months into this rate recession. Okay, that's the longest since 2009. Okay. This market will chew you up and spit you out if you are not either on your A game or you're not willing to learn the A game. Now, if you're just starting off and you're new and you're full of vigor and you're like inspired, great. But you got to be teachable. You've got to learn. And you got to be able to pay the price of education. The learning curve can be very expensive when dealing with spot freight. But once you get a system down, it can be very rewarding. I've got a friend of mine that's taken the rest of the year off. Why? Because because he runs hard the other times. And he's efficient and he knows his numbers. He seeks out the loads that no one else wants to do. And that was always my goal. Was, man, I'd love to take all of December off. For the holidays or whatever. I never quite got to that point. I think the closest I did was when I went from Landstar to Schneider. I did take most of December off, but that was the help of a family member. Like, what do you want for Christmas? I said, to stay home. She's like, all right, done. And that was great. But I would still run a little bit. Usually I take the whole week of Thanksgiving and then run hard for the first 2 weeks of December, and then run very light or not at all, but the last 2 weeks of December. And then I would run from, the 27th to January 3rd. If there was freight, you usually get a good rate. The truck stops were awesome because they're half empty. And that was like my favorite time to run if the weather didn't suck. So. Mallory says, exactly, I'm down due to a surgery, but no problem. Put money back on the good times because bad times are coming. There you go. Current Amazon posting: Columbia, Ladson, South Carolina, Bristol, PA, New Jersey, offering $4,000. But then you'll have the drivers like, I don't do New Jersey, man. New Jersey sucks. Right? You've never seen or passed by one? Well, you're not looking. I'm just messing with you. On December 31st, I'll be able to afford to take the rest of the year off. I love that. Struggling with T-Bone, what's up? Anyways, knowing your markets, right? And so that's where these tools come in handy. Like, let's look at Texas. I was doing this for a driver the other day, actually yesterday. So we sort this by highest rate, and let's see where the money is coming out of Texas, right? El Paso to Trenton, New Jersey, $210 a mile. El Paso is usually a dead market, so this is surprising me. Now they're at 4,500, but look, the average is around between 54 and 48. And you're also, let me get that back up here. You're also looking at about $108 in tolls. That's not bad. Highest paying freight is usually going to either northwest, southeast, or northeast, right? A lot of stuff coming out of Laredo. So Laredo, El Paso seems to be the hotter markets right now on this load board. Now, if you want to research a particular lane, let's go to market rates. And then right here, I've got Jacksonville to Houston. Let's switch that around. Okay, there it goes, adjusted. So if you're making about $2,000 to go from Houston to Jacksonville, and then you can turn right around and go back, let's say you live in Houston, you're making about 12. Then you add that all up together. And here is where you can see the volumes, right? You can see the volume and the backhaul volume all in one shot. It tells you the tolls all in one shot, and then it shows you how volatile the market is. Then it gives you a map. This is the number one tool that I use this for. And the mileage calculator for tolls. I'll show you how that works. Let's put in St. Louis. Whoops. We'll put Edwardsville. Same thing, right? To Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I know this run very, very well. Spent a majority of my career on this road here. $770 loaded miles, 13 hours, 14 hours drive time, which that's probably lower. You're probably going to be higher than that, actually, probably about 15. But total toll cost $205 a mile. And then it gives you the breakdown for your IFTA report. How many miles in each state. Now, Landstar, I had to do this manually until the ELD started doing it. And there's your tolls. So, and I've put this up against other people's toll calculators, and it's pretty accurate. If anything, it overestimates. But that's probably that. Those two tools are the ones I use the most. This hot market map is worthless if you have drivers that want to just run in a specific area. That's the chasing money anytime, anywhere. That's a great platform if you're up for that, if you're up to the task. But most drivers want to have steady consistency. I've got one driver that does nothing but Illinois, Wisconsin to Kentucky. That's all he's wanting to do. And so that's where we look at. So when I go to a load board and I type in, you might have 600 loads coming out of Chicagoland, but only 30 of them are going to Kentucky. And so now we've taken 600 loads and put them down to 30. Now, as long as that works for his business and he's good with that, then we work with it. But also having the tools like, okay, what would happen if I went basically back and forth from, say, Michigan to Florida and back? What would that look like? You'd probably want to do a little bit of a triangle. Do Michigan to Florida, Florida to Georgia, and then Georgia up to Michigan. Or Michigan to Florida, Deadhead up to Georgia, Georgia to, say, Kentucky, and then Kentucky up to Michigan. There's different strategies. Or, Georgia to Tennessee, Tennessee up to Michigan. Or Georgia to Missouri, and then Missouri up to Michigan. You might make a little bit more money. So you have the out and backs, and then you have the triangles, and then you have circles. You have 4 stops, four things to get to where you want to go. So this is the hot market map for van. Oregon's up green. So let's take a look what's going on over here. Sort this by highest rate per mile. See where all that's going. I'm going to guess Nevada or Arizona or Washington. $1,000 for 351 miles. Utah. Here we go. This is interesting. North Plains, Oregon to Manhattan, Kansas. $4,000, $235 a mile. Let's take a look at this load. Well, that's about a normal rate there. So if that's a one and done, that's a great way to get back east. And then Manhattan, Kansas, there's not much out there, but at that rate, you can probably deadhead to either Omaha or Kansas City. Denver, of course, always in the highest rate per mile. One going to Phoenix, 209 a mile. Now, these are just posted rates. You can still negotiate. The only time you don't really negotiate is if it says firm in the comments. If it's a generous rate altogether, I don't even try. What? Like if the lane usually pays $800 and they're at $1,000, I'm not saying like, well, can you do $1,200? No, I'll take it for $1,000. Because if I don't, somebody else will. Your competition will. The ones that, have their costs so low that they can take whatever and be okay. Or they don't know their numbers and they're taking whatever and they're not okay. And you got to ride that out. You got to wait them out, right? So that's one of 2 things that's going on there. Check out flatbed. Yeah, we can do that. Let's put this on flatbed. We'll throw step deck in there too. You want to look at Oregon coming out flatbed? Cheap Freight says when booking loads, just throw a dart at the map and then book a load going where the day sticks, where the dart sticks. I did that and I had to buy a new monitor. Let's see. All right, so the highest rate per mile coming out of Oregon is going to California, $410 a mile, $2,500 for 610 miles, 48,000 pounds. Step deck, flatbed says it'll do both. Crane mats, no tarp, dunnage, no Conestoga trailers, quick pay available. And then let's look at California outbound. Let's say you do that. What's the highest paying thing here? On the long haul stuff, $1.80s. I don't know if you'd want to do that. So let's do the highest rate per mile here. Oregon, South Dakota, not much over $2 a mile. But here's one going to Oregon. So you can that's actually, if you can score that and stay in that lane, you might be able to do back and forth California, Oregon and make decent coin both directions. They got a lot of high paying freight going to San Francisco. And then Reno, of course. Now, if we go to the long haul stuff, let's go to the highest rate. 6,000 to go to New Jersey. Let's take a look at that one. They're way above the average. 60-foot load. Yeah, it's got a whole bunch of stuff added to it. Loads in White City, Oregon, then Homedale, Idaho, delivers to Delanco, New Jersey. So a little bit more than a one and done on that one. Troutdale, Oregon to Dallas. They're at 45 for a $4,200 lane. There's 2 extra stops. Boring, Oregon and Dallas, Texas. So probably 2 shipper pickup. So 283 from Klamath Falls, Oregon to El Paso, which El Paso is kind of difficult to get out of. Flatbed tarps, no hot shot, 6-foot tarp. Looks like a one and done. They're above the average. Now look at this. Holiday City, Ohio, $1.87 a mile from Gilchrist. But decent outbound rates in some areas. Let's look at Idaho. Onions and lumber coming out of Oregon. Okay. 321 to go to Montana. Of course, good luck getting out. See, this is all kind of foreign to me because I dispatched a flatbed a couple of years ago for a minute, and very, 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 very limited person. Very limited. I talked to one flatbed guy who called me. He goes, "Hey, man, I'm interested in your services." At the time that I dispatched other carriers, and I was like, "Okay, what do you got?" He goes, "Well, I'm flatbed. I need to be home every night. I don't tarp, and I don't chain." I said, "Good luck." And then he proceeded to tell me he was $200,000 in debt. I'm like, correlation much? So, I mean, sometimes we're their own worst enemy, and that's the harsh truth, right? These maps are worthless if you're not willing to learn and willing to utilize these tools. That's the harsh truth that a lot of people don't want to hear, right? Entitlement is a big part of it as well. I deserve this. Okay, why? That's a sales tactic. You deserve a break. You deserve this Pepsi Cola. You deserve to take a vacation that you can't afford because you worked for it. No, you slaved for it. So careful on looking at what you deserve, right? So, yeah, you're right. Flatbed trucking will chew you up and spit you out fast. But anyways, hopefully we'll be live Friday. I'm going to get off here. 48065. If you wish to try out the 123 low board yourself, don't take my word for it. You might try it out and go, dude. Or you might be like, dude. So anyways, every tool at your disposal is to your advantage. The more tools you have, the better repairs you can make, both in your truck and in your business and searching for loads. So with that being said, strength for today, hope for tomorrow. And hopefully we'll see you on Friday. Peace out.